Welcome to Leaders Arise with Joyful Julie. Join us as we explore life-changing, freedom-releasing biblical truths to empower leaders and patriots to reach their full potential, cancel out fraudulent beliefs, and increase in influence and financial success. Let's get started. Imagine one day that you're laying in bed, that you've been working on selling your book, your new book, for 14 days, and you finally have a day off. And inside your head, God says, go down to the coffee shop. And you're laying there going, I'm so tired. I can't move. Every bone in my body just wants to lay here. And God says, go down to the coffee shop. And I'm like, but God, I'm tired. He says, go down to the coffee shop. Lord, I've been working for 14 days straight. I need to take a day off. He says, go down to the coffee shop. And he says it, and whenever he says it 3 times, I know that I need to listen. And so I pull on my clothes, I get in my car, I'm actually kind of crabby, and I go to the coffee shop. And as I'm walking in, I see these 2 ladies kind of by the front, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in and get a cup of coffee, and I'm going to go sit down at one of the tables by myself, and I'm at the coffee shop. So I get my coffee, I sit there for like a half an hour, nothing happens. And I'm like, I wonder why. Well, sometimes God, I think, just wants to see if we'll obey, if we're going to be obedient or not, to do what he asks us to do. But that day, God I needed to be in the coffee shop on that day at that specific hour, because that day I met a woman named Melissa. And Melissa changed my life. And through our friendship, I was able to speak into her life and help change her life as well. And there was like a divine connection that happened, and it all started at the coffee shop. And so today, we're going to be talking about go forth, because sometimes God needs us at a specific place, doing a specific thing for a specific reason. And I call this a go forth moment. It can change the course of our lives. It can change the course of someone else's life if we'll just follow through on the go forth moment. I heard a story recently about a pastor who was in line at a grocery store, and he felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to give the person in front of him, I think it was $100. And he ends up giving the person $100. And what ends up happening is the person had prayed and they wanted to have a Christmas for their 2 children because their husband had actually just left them and they had $20 for Christmas. And so by obeying that little small voice, and I call this the go give moment, is that sometimes God is asking us to give of our time, our energy, our resources, a go give moment, to be his hands and feet, to be the care, to be the person who is making someone feel loved and appreciated in that moment. Our life is really made up of moments. And I sometimes think of an hourglass, and as you turn it around and the sand starts pouring out, it's like the time of our lives. And each moment, each hour, we can't get that back throughout our entire lifetime until our time in our life is over. And so one of the things that I have in my book, The Incredible Life Makeover, is that the sands of time, that every moment of our lifetime is important. And when God gives us a go forth command, or a go give command, or a go love opportunity, that we should obey that as promptly as we can. Now, Abraham had a go forth moment that was very challenging. And so in Genesis chapter 12, God is speaking to his friend Abraham. And I want to encourage you all that, yes, God is God, but sometimes we can gain in intimacy and we can love what God loves and hate what God hates. And we can get so close to God that Jesus will call us his friends. And so God's talking to Abraham, Abraham's talking to God, and God says to him, he says, go for yourself away from your country, from your relatives and your family's house, to a land that I will show you. The first point I want to make here is that sometimes God asks you to leave something to go to the place that he's sending you, where there's going to be blessing, where there's going to be new relationships, where there's going to be new opportunity. And sometimes we have to let go of the things that we're keeping such a tight hold on, to grasp and let that thing go, so that we can go forth to where the Lord is calling us to do. We can possibly go in and start that new relationship. We can go to a new business or start a new business. There's so many go forth moments that can be scary in our lives. But continuing on in verse 1 of chapter 12 of Genesis, it says, to a land that I will show you. I think of my own life and go forth moments. There were times when God said to move from where I was comfortable and experiencing success and to move to another state. And it was really hard and I didn't want to go. And it wasn't until God really impressed upon me that this was his will, and that if I would let go and I would go, that he would be with me. And he showed us a new place to live and grow and learn. And it was a beautiful time in my life. But we have to have the faith, the only believe faith, to say yes to the going forth to where God is wanting you to go, to the opportunity that God is leading you toward, to the challenge sometimes of what God is calling you to do. And so verse 2, why does God want him to go? It says, I will make of you a great nation. Sometimes in our yes to the go forth moment, there's going to come increase, that Abraham was going to become a great nation. And all the nations of the earth really came through Father Abraham. Then it continues on and it says, I will bless you with abundant increase of favors. And so sometimes we can only imagine as we go forth the things that are going to go wrong. We can only think about the things that we don't have. We can only think about our own failings and limitations and how we don't know how to do that. But just imagine if in your go forth moment that you had the faith that God was going to bless you in that he was going to make you successful in that he was going to maybe call you to be a world changer in that area. And instead of the negative things about all the things that could go wrong, what happens if they didn't? I remember I heard Graham Cook teach one time about how he was at a dinner party and a person was all worried because she had started this new job and she was anxious about what happens if she didn't do a good job and what happens if she didn't like them. And Graham said, but what happens if if you're not so anxious, but you're only just a little nervous because they hired you for the job, so they must like you. Yeah, she said, maybe I am just a little nervous, and maybe I'm just a little nervous because I don't know how they do things. And Graham said, yeah. And what happens if maybe you're just not a little nervous about how they don't do things, but maybe you're a little excited about the new things that you're going to be able to do? And she said, yeah, I am kind of excited. I do feel like I'm qualified for this job. And I was excited about the projects that they were going to assign me to do. And in 3 or 4 or 5 questions in that conversation, the woman went from being full of anxiety, fear of the unknown, fear of what happens if they didn't like her, fear if she wasn't enough, and moved her thinking all the way to, yeah, this is going to be new and there might be some surprises, but I'm excited to see the new projects and excited to see what kind of success I can have. And so as part of being leaders, as part of being parents, as part of moving to new cities or starting new businesses or standing up for truth in the public square, or maybe making a Facebook post that you are a little nervous about, or whatever it could be with your children, that if we could shift our thinking from being fear-based to only believing and having a faith-based, what happens if God's blessing was on me? What happens if I succeed? What good things could be ahead? And so let's continue on with, because there's even more good things in Genesis chapter 12. In verse 2, it says, I will make you a great nation, because his influence and his impact is going to increase. It says, I'll bless you with the abundance of favor. And then it continues on. And it says, I will make your name famous and distinguished. Imagine that in that area that God's asking you to go forth, that he's going to make your name famous for what you are doing for him. The thing is it's not going to be that you're not going to be fearful of all the criticism, but imagine the inspiration that you could be providing. Imagine the truth of the gospel, of how it's going to change people's lives. Imagine that the service you're providing and the godly or good way that you're providing it with honesty and humility, that the thing is that the reputation of your business and that when people see you providing that and know that you're a Christian, how good that is going to make the kingdom look, that there is an honest businessman out there that you can trust. Imagine how your own reputation is going to be able to be built on the kingdom of heaven and on truth and humility. I love that. But here's the beautiful thing. At the end of verse 2, it says, and you will be a blessing dispensing good to others. I love that. Imagine that our thoughts, when God is asking us to go forth into something new, when he's asking us to actually be the light out in the darkness, that we don't think about all the bad things that are going to happen, but we so identify that we're going to be not only receive the blessing, but we're going to have the joy of being a blessing to others. That God is going to not only pour blessing on us, but that he's going to be able to move that blessing through us to other people. And there is a verse in the Bible that says, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Imagine that you would have the blessing by saying yes, that we would be able to have the blessing and goodness of heaven flowing to us and through us to other people if we will say yes to the go forth moment. And so as listeners of Leaders Arise, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast, I'm asking you today to really consider stepping out of your security zone, your safety zone. I'm asking you possibly to step out of the shadows and into being the light, to shining in the darkness, to being salt, to be able to preserve our society, our way of life, our Judeo-Christian value system, to preserve the goodness in your family, to steward it well, all of those things. When God gives us the go forth moment that sometimes we just don't know how. There was a time in my own life when I was having a relationship issue and it went on, and I would cry over the situation, but I was praying and I was saying, God, I'm praying that reconciliation would come. I'm praying grace would come. And some of my friends would say, Julie, you're beating up the wrong tree. This situation is impossible. And I truly believed that nothing was impossible with God and that He could bring about restoration through myself, through someone else that I didn't even know or imagine. And what happened is that relationship was reconciled to the amazement of everyone. And we were able to continue to walk out that relationship in greater blessing, in greater forgiveness, and greater appreciation that we were reconnected. There was a specialness to the love from something that was thought it was lost, and God redeemed it and restored it. And so there's nothing that's impossible with God. And so even in those days when you don't think that you might know how to rectify that situation, but God is saying to go to that family member. God's saying to go to that husband or wife. God's saying to start to pray for that estranged relationship, because He's the expert at redemption. He's the expert at helping us to forgive and to restore connection. What about if God's asking you to go and start a business or start a new branch, or to slightly change your business and be like, whoa, that sounds a little scary. The thing is what happens if He's really wanting to increase your impact and increase your influence from the Go Forth Challenge? What happens if He's asking you or highlighting someone at work and just going and encouraging that coworker and asking them if they would like prayer? Can you imagine not the bad things that could happen, but the good thing from you carrying the blessing and opening up your mouth for a go forth moment? What happens if God's asking you to consider, or maybe even just put your name on the application to run for the school board, to run for the city council, to run for county board? I mean, there's a billion things, to run for an office in one of the community organizations, for a give back opportunity, to help save our families, to help save our values of our culture. The culture is in a downward spiral right now. Teenage suicides on the rise, family breakups on the rise, addiction on the rise. And God is speaking to leaders right now to rise up, and He's asking for a go forth moment from some of you, from some of us. And I'm just asking you to think, not necessarily about how hard it's going to be, but what about if the anointing that He's going to put on your life is going to be a blessing to many, that favor He's going to put on you like He put on Abraham, that He's going to dispensing good to others, that it's going to be the answer to people's prayers, and you're not going to be left all alone, but they're going to come beside you and support you, that you can be a voice of leadership in these days. Will you say yes to our go forth moment, to our go give moments? Will you say yes to the moment to say, I will lead my family. I will follow the voice of the Lord. I will pray. I will read my Bible, and I will stand up for what is right for us in these days. And I believe that there's nothing that is impossible with God once we say yes. And we're in this series called Only Believe. Do you believe that God will bless you, that he will be with you to the place where you could become dispensing good, that you will, like Jesus, go about doing good, healing all that were oppressed by the enemy, that God is going to use us to be salt and light in the earth. And the power principle that I have for us today is that go forward by faith and you will be blessed. By faith, go forth with courage. By faith, go forth toward the promised land, although it may be uncharted. Say yes to the voice of the Lord. Say yes to going forth. By faith, go forth and walk in the blessing. It's okay to elevate. It's okay to become a person of influence, a person with greater influence. It's okay to have your name be risen up as the Lord uses you to speak forth his truth in these days. And it's okay by faith to go forth, to be a blessing, to give, to serve, and to lead. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And I just encourage you that if it has been a blessing for you today, if you'd like it, if it's on a Facebook post, if you'd follow us on the podcast, and if you'd just do us a small favor and share the link with a friend, family member, or group, let's grow the Leaders Arise family to be a blessing in these days. Thank you for listening to this episode of Leaders Arise. For more information about my newsletter, speaking events, and coaching services, see newlifefortoday.com.